We all have those calls that haunt us. There's not a 911 dispatcher alive who doesn't have at least one that sticks with them for the rest of their lives. Hell, most have too many to count. I always thought I was above that. I'd never let this job or those calls get to me. I was tough. But then September 12th happened. I work the night shift in a very rural county sheriff's office, a little over 1,200 square miles, and with a population of 31,000, not a lot in the way of heinous crimes happened. There were those out of the ordinary UFO calls every now and then, but most of the time it was loose cows and deer accidents. We sure do have our share of crazies, and that night, my caller was one of them. It was about 3:01 in the morning. My partner Anna and I were watching reruns of 90 Day Fiancé when the 911 call tones went off. Totally routine. I try to answer the phones faster than Anna because she has the quickest hands in the West when it comes to call taking, and unfortunately, this time I got it. County 911, what's the address of your emergency? Silence. Hello, County 911. More silence. I took to my call screen, where the coordinates are. Updating the call, it finally phases to the correct coordinates to map roughly where the caller is. Hello, County 911, what's your emergency? I repeat again, entering the coordinates in. It maps to a residence in our second largest city, and immediately I know who our caller is. Marjorie Cadenberry. Don't let her name fool you. She's not a sweet old lady, but rather a 32-year-old drug user. Extensive history in our in-house records, and I don't even need to look her up. In my 3 years of dispatching here, I can't recall just 1 week where I didn't have a call with Marjorie. Hello, Marge? Do you have an emergency? I asked again. We were on first-name basis. Yes, I finally hear her whisper. Okay, what's going on? She pauses, her breathing trembling slightly. There's something in my closet. There's someone in your closet? I asked, quickly typing into my call narrative. How do you know they're there? Did you see them? No, not someone, she whispered again. I could tell she was truly terrified. Something. I don't know what it is. Okay. At this point, I'm convinced Marge is having another drug-induced hallucination. It wouldn't be the first time. Describe for me what it looks like. In the background, Anna is dispatching our area deputy. Please, send someone, Marge whispered. Yes, I have a deputy on the way, Marge, but I need you to tell me what you're seeing, I said. When you said something, what did you mean? It's tall, she said. It has to bend over to fit, and it has long claws. She paused, and I could hear her sniffling. She was definitely crying. It's tapping them on the floor. Can you hear them? She paused, and I listened carefully to see if I could actually hear anything. Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought just barely I could hear a rhythmic tapping. Did you hear them? She asked, almost desperately, like she was begging me to believe her. I ignored her question. What else, Marge? What else do you see? Her voice trembled. It's all black, and it has really big teeth. It keeps licking its teeth like it wants to eat me. So it knows you're there? Yes, she said shakily. It's staring at me right now. Glowing yellow eyes. For the first time in my life, a shiver went down my spine from her words. Every horror movie I've ever seen came to mind. Though I knew better, my supernatural bone was piqued. Could there really be a demon in her closet? Are you able to leave the room, Marge? I asked, typing all of this into our dispatch narrative. Can you go outside until my deputy gets there to see what's in there? I don't think so, she sobbed. If I move, it'll kill me. Have you been drinking tonight, Marjorie? I know how incriminating it sounded, but it was a legitimate clarifying question. Call me heartless if you want. No, she sobbed again. Please believe me. I know I've done stupid things before, but this is real. I haven't been drinking, and I haven't taken any drugs recently. I don't know what it is, but I'm so scared. It keeps tapping its claws. You have to hear them, don't you? The phone cracked as she held it out at arm's length. There was no mistaking this time. I could hear something tapping. A pit formed in my stomach. What the hell? It was like the sound of long acrylic fingernails. Okay, Marge. I'm going to stay on the phone with you until my deputy gets there. I looked to our mapping software. He's not super far out, so it shouldn't be too much longer. Okay, thank you, she whispered. It's just staring at me. Does it have a face? I asked, against my better judgment. Did I actually believe there was something there? Yeah, but it's all teeth. Like it's smiling. And it hasn't moved since you saw it? No, it's just there, staring and tapping its claws. How long has it been there? I don't know. I woke up to the tapping noise and just saw it there, so I called you right away, Marge said. You don't believe me, do you? It's not that I don't believe you, Marge, I answered. I just never heard of this sort of thing before. What you're describing sounds like a demon from a horror film. I think it is. Another shiver. Her voice sounded so convinced. Real or not, she was legitimately seeing something. Whether it was an actual demon or a hallucination, part of me felt bad for her. Being absolutely convinced something like what she described was staring at her, it would be terrifying. Marge suddenly gasped, and the phone rustled as it fell from her hands. What's going on, Marge? I asked quickly, my tone dropping in seriousness. It's coming towards me, she screamed. Oh God, it's claws, please help me. My deputy is almost there, Marge, I said loudly over her screams, but I doubt she heard me. If I hadn't been freaked out by then, I was now. Those blood-curdling screams were ones of pure and unfiltered terror. It was like I was listening to someone whose life was coming to an end in the most violent way possible. My pulse was flying as I was trying to type everything I heard into the call. Next to me, Anna was relaying the info to our deputy. Come on, I thought. Get there already. The problem with a rural county was that we didn't have as many deputies on as others, so our response time was significantly longer. This particular night, that city's officer had called in sick, so it was the county's job to cover if there were any calls. 1303, be advised, she's screaming and not answering us anymore, Tasha said to our responding deputy. 1303, 10-4, 2 minutes out. 1308 to dispatch, I'll be 1076 as well. Our other unit in the area piped up. I had seen him making his way towards the area before, but now he was going emergent. I repeatedly tried to get Marge to come back on the phone, but all I could hear were her screams. I could also hear things being thrown around, like she was smashing into them with her body. And suddenly, as quick as it had happened, everything went silent. Marge, I shouted. Marge, are you there? The phone crackled. He's going to kill me, Marge said monotonously. He knows who you are now. You're next. And then the line went dead. If I had a handset phone, it would have fallen out of my hand. How would anyone not get unnerved by something like that? The movie lover in me was terrified. You're next. 1303 dispatch, I'm 1023. The first responding deputy advised he was on scene. His name was Jason, our youngest deputy on the department. A super nice kid who was probably the best person that could respond to help Marge. Anna held radio traffic just for that call, and we waited for what seemed like an eternity as Jason went into the house. 1303 dispatch. It nearly made me jump out of my seat, my nerves on end. Get a med rolling. She's cut up her arms pretty bad. Within 5 minutes, our med unit was rolling. Jason and Trevor, his backup, ended up chaptering Marge. They came up before Jason transferred her to the mental hospital after getting medical clearance and explained everything that happened. Apparently, Marge was tripping out on drugs, my first suspicion, and decided to cut her arms with razor blades. She'd also trashed her apartment in her drug stupor, which would explain the crashing around I heard. "But what about the tapping?" I asked. "I heard the tapping she was talking about." "I don't know anything about that," Jason said with a shrug. "But it was probably something she was doing that she didn't realize she was doing." You're probably right," I said, but I still couldn't shake the bad feeling. "It's sad, honestly," Jason said, retrieving the papers off of the printer that he was printing. "She's so fried from drugs, she's just crazy now." I glanced out the dispatch window to the lobby, where Trevor was sitting with Marge. She sat with her head hanging down and her arms in bandages. Seeing someone hopped up on drugs was always a little disturbing to me. As if she knew I was looking at her, she lifted her head and her eyes met mine. They grew wide, as if she was about to be hit by a bus, and she pointed at me, letting out another piercing cry. Trevor stood up as she did, putting himself between her and me inadvertently. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't pointing at me, but rather behind me. I told myself it was dumb, but why was it I couldn't look over my shoulder? Jason flew out the door with the paperwork he needed, and both struggled down to the front with her, to load her up in the squad. In 2 days, hospital staff would find Marge dead in her room, her head somehow twisted unnaturally around. Her death would never have a full explanation. Finally, after taking a deep breath, I turned around. There was nothing there. I let out a breath that I didn't know I was holding, and then laughed at myself. Of course, there was nothing there. The rest of the shift went by smoothly, the whole 20 minutes we had left. When we finally left that night, I couldn't wait to go home and go to bed. That call had really rattled me and left me with a headache. I got back to my little apartment, greeted by my little white cat. After giving her more food, I took off my uniform and hung it up in the closet, making sure to close the doors. Hurrying back to my bed, I jumped in and turned the TV on for background noise. That night, I slept with the lights on. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild, or the stress of a long week. But as I closed the door to my closet, I could have sworn there was a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. I think the idea came to us after Mr. Garibaldi's funeral. He was our junior high gym teacher, a lovable nut job, and I think just about everybody liked him. We went to the service, of course, and as we passed by the excavator in the graveyard, I remember Nate saying something like, "Being buried alive is the worst damn fear." We stopped and peered down the hole. It wasn't finished yet, the ground more or less frozen solid, but they were about halfway done. I could see Nate shuddering as he carefully glanced over the edge. I think Frank noticed his reaction too, and he gave me a weak nod as I raised my eyebrows. Now it's important to know that Nate was a real prankster. He loved screwing us over, Frank and me, and he'd been taking great pleasure in doing so for the better part of our lives. The three of us go back all the way to kindergarten, and I remember very vividly the first time he pranked me. He pulled out the chair from under me as I sat down, and I ended up sprawling on the floor helplessly. Since then, his pranks have evolved into more sophisticated shenanigans, of course, like bubble wrapping my car, or shaving Frank's head while he slept, or sporadically hacking into our social media accounts to change our profile pictures. Harmless stuff like that. But we were getting pretty sick of it. It was like he believed the prankster persona to be the cornerstone of his identity, like he'd cease to exist without it. Like his entire life revolved around screwing people over. It was getting pretty damn tiresome, I'll tell you that much. So Frank and I had been discussing it for weeks, how to prank him back, how to make him realize just how crappy it can make you feel. Because talking to him about it didn't yield anything. He'd just make excuses, call us pussies or whatever, and eventually just change the subject entirely. So that was that then. We couldn't resolve it peacefully. We had to hit him back, and hard. So I came up with the plan. It was pretty straightforward, but the genius was in the simplicity of it. We'd construct a makeshift coffin, basically a wooden box, get him blackout drunk, no hard feet, and place him in it when he passes out. We'd nail the thing shut, shovel a handful of dirt around for that extra flair of authenticity, and wait patiently until he woke up, hopefully freaking the hell out. Then we'd open the box, after letting him sweat for a few minutes, and do the old point and laugh. It was the perfect prank. Correction. It would have been the perfect prank if we had just followed the plan. And to be fair, everything started great. We threw a party at Frank's, and I made sure to spike Nate's drink whenever he wasn't paying attention. At midnight, he was wasted. And to top it off, we got him to take a few extra shots, just to make sure he'd reach the wanted level of dead drunk. After the party cleared out, we carried him to the garage, where we had set up the box, placed him in there, nailed the lid shut, and shoveled some dirt around. It was perfect. Now all we had to do was wait. But it soon got dreadfully boring, so we went back to the house and kept drinking, until we both just passed out. I woke up with a terrible hangover 12 hours later. All I could think about was getting home, so that's just what I did. I left Frank snoring on the couch and spent the rest of the day trying not to move at all. As far as I know, that's exactly what Frank did as well. Yes, you guessed it. We completely forgot about Nate. Look, it was a pretty dumb thing to do, I know. Not the coffin thing, he totally had that coming. But forgetting we even put him in there in the first place, yeah, definitely not cool. I was lounging on my couch when everything suddenly came back to me, and I immediately panicked and called Frank. Guy wasn't responding, probably still passed out, so I rushed over there, heading straight for the garage. The box was open and empty. I let out a sigh of relief. He probably kicked the thing open and got out. No big deal. But upon closer inspection, I noticed something else. Vomit, feces, piss, blood, and claw marks on the lid. Holy hell. He must have totally lost it in there. There was no telling how long he'd been trapped, but it didn't really matter. The sense of horror, confusion, and utter dread he must have experienced, it made my stomach churn just thinking about it. He had to be pissed at us. I tried calling him over and over, but got no response. I sent him several messages asking if he was okay, and made sure to apologize profusely, and I don't think he even read them. I got Frank to do the same, but nothing. It was like he was ignoring us, and with good reason, some would claim. I had a glass with him the following Monday, and I was truly dreading having to face him. What would he do? How would he react? Whatever he did, I knew I deserved it. But not knowing what state of mind he was in was torture. I can't really describe how I felt when I saw him approaching me in the hallway. I froze, just stood there, trembling. "Sup, Paul?" he smiled. "You all right?" "What? Yeah," I stuttered. "You?" "Yeah, I'm good." He gave me a pat on the back. "Sick prank you guys pulled." "Yeah," I said hesitantly. "You're not angry?" "Hell no," he laughed. "That was epic." It was weird. It was the opposite of what I was expecting, but maybe it had worked. Maybe he finally understood how it felt being on the other side of a prank. Yet there was something about him, something strange, like he was too happy. No one should be that happy after what we had pulled. But I don't know. The week went by fine. I mean, there was nothing really out of the ordinary. The days just passed, you know. Nate seemed calmer, more composed maybe, but still the same old Nate in most ways. The weekend eventually came, and Frank wanted us all to go out drinking. I guess he was still feeling guilty about what we did, and wanted everything to go back to normal again. I declined, the memories from last weekend still way too fresh in my mind. Nate declined too. He didn't say why, but he seemed pretty chill about it. I didn't do much that weekend. Played some games, hung out with my brother, just chilled. I couldn't stop thinking about that box, though. The horror Nate had to go through, It just kept coming back to me, kept haunting me. It didn't add up. He should be freaking livid. But he wasn't. He didn't show any emotion, like he was dead inside. Sunday morning, I got the call from Nate's mom. She wondered if I'd seen him. He'd been gone since Thursday. No one had heard from him. They were getting worried. He'd been horribly depressed, locking himself in his room, refusing to talk to anyone. Did I know why? What could have happened to him? What was going on with him? I couldn't tell her. Didn't have the guts to admit it to her. We'd broken him, Frank and me. Mostly me. I slouched down on the couch, feeling like an utter piece of crap. What was going on with him? How depressed was he? Could he be suicidal? No, not Nate. My phone rang. It was Frank. I really didn't want to talk to him, wasn't feeling it. But he just kept calling and calling and calling. What the hell do you want, Frank? I finally answered. Paul? Paul! His voice was barely audible and the connection was horrible. Frank, I asked. What's going on? Where are you? You gotta help me, Paul, he yelled. Help me! Calm down, Frank, I said. What the hell is going on? His voice was high-pitched and desperate, and I'm pretty sure he was crying, whimpering. I'm buried, Paul, he screamed hysterically. I'm in the coffin. Wait, what? What coffin? Please, get me out. The connection worsened, and I could barely hear him. Where are you? I'm not alone. His voice started fading. Mr. Garibaldi is down here with me. The connection finally broke. I tried calling him back several times, but only got his voicemail. What did he mean Mr. Garibaldi was there with him? Mr. Garibaldi was dead, 6 feet under. Holy crap. My phone buzzed. It was a text message. I looked at the sender, fumbled the phone, my hands trembling, my heart racing, adrenaline pumping. It was from Nate. See you at the funeral, bro. Ever since I can remember, I've always been a chronically ill child. I've been in the hospital more times than I can count, and I take a dizzying amount of medications that requires not one, but 2 pill boxes to keep it all straight, and to accommodate all the pills, which often puff out the lids. I was the kid who spent his summers inside on a respirator because I always seemed to be gasping for air. When I used an inhaler, I often felt worse, like someone was jabbing me in the lungs with tiny needles. My bones were unusually brittle, not enough to be diagnosed with brittle bone disease, a la Sam Jackson and Unbreakable, and the incredibly goofy Glass, but enough to help keep my family dock in booming business. I threw up often, but amid the bouts of chronic nausea and fatigue, I always felt hungry. My immune system was running a constant marathon, and I had no idea how my white blood cells kept the pace up enough to keep me living. It didn't seem to be cancer or some other autoimmune disease, but it was something. I was poked and prodded by every type of specialist and house-level medical genius, but not one of them could come up with a complete diagnosis for all the weird issues I had. So instead, they blasted me with a shotgun full of diagnoses and just watched to see which ones would stick. In my case, the idea of a differential diagnosis instead became, well, do you have a better idea? Thankfully, my parents had good medical insurance, and I was young enough to not have to worry about transitioning out of it anytime soon. I was fairly certain the insurance office regarded me as a bomb that was ready to go off at any time. During my sickest days, I'm pretty sure my parents even wondered if I would be better off dead. After all, what kind of a life can a child have when most of their life is spent in the hospital? I had made it to high school mostly intact and was fudging my way through a reading quiz about A Tale of Two Cities. I only read the back cover of the book during Miss Lewandowski's class when I felt a terrible pain from my stomach. I hunched over at my desk, and Miss Lewandowski, aware that I basically went to the student clinic every week with a bizarre complaint, let me out of class to phone my parents. He's gonna spew, I heard Harold Kramer say as I left the class. I pressed my forehead into the cold steel of the lockers as I phoned my mom. Within a half hour, we were in the ER, and I was again being poked and prodded by the staff who I mostly knew on a first-name basis. After several bouts of testing, it was determined that my appendix was being an asshole and had to go. Great. "He's overdue on rent," Dr. Landis said with a chuckle. "Despite the fact that I've been chronically ill, I've managed to avoid needing much in the way of surgery. From how the doctors explained it to me, my body seemed to be anatomically sound, but it was like something else was getting in the way of my organs, making them work less efficiently than they should be, but not enough to be a liability. I didn't really care, as I just preferred to avoid getting sliced open. The surgery I did have had mostly been to fix fractured bones, and after a while, I just avoided any and all physical activity, so I never had to go through that again. They prepped me for surgery, and I was able to spend some time with my mom, who wasn't as worried as a normal mother would be in the same situation, mostly because of how often we'd been through this before. Dad was on his way from work and would likely be there when I woke up. They gave me the gas, and I was out. When I woke up, things became incredibly strange. I was really groggy and out of it for a while, but the most surprising thing was that the doctor said I needed chemotherapy right away. I never felt so sick in my life, as they pumped me full of the poison, right after coming out of surgery, no less. I began to genuinely worry that this could be the end. Had I had cancer all along and they never caught it? Were my insides filled with tumors? My mom looked white as a sheet in the chair next to my bed. All she would tell me is that the doctors found out what was making me sick, and this would help. I was getting mad. My dad wasn't there yet, and I couldn't understand what was happening. Getting chemotherapy after your appendix was removed did not seem to be the norm. In between severe bouts of vomiting, I drifted in and out of sleep, and a fever I had never experienced before. This had to be the end. I had nothing left to give. My vomiting turned into sick, dry heaves and empty retches. I could feel my throat cracking from the effort. I'm not sure how many days passed in the ICU, but one day I woke up and Dr. Landis was sitting next to me. "Dr. Landis," I whispered. "The hell's going on with me?" "Hey there, champ," he said casually. It looked like he too had been through the ringer. Though I had felt terrible before, I was feeling a bit better. "That's why I'm here," he said. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I'm not exaggerating when I say that. In my 20 years of medical practice, not once have I ever seen anything remotely like this in my life. I've called around, nobody has." I felt scared and drew the thin hospital covers closer to myself. What the hell could it be? "Have you ever heard of parasites?" I thought back to biology class. "Yeah, I don't know a lot, but I know they have a host that they feed off of in some way." "Right," Dr. Landis said with a heavy sigh. "Well, it turns out you had parasites living inside you. Normally, there are spots parasites can commonly be found. On x-rays, for example, they may show up as a mass in the stomach, or larvae in the lungs." I winced at the disgusting thought that something else had been living with me all this time. Something I couldn't see. "The thing is," Dr. Landis said, and then stopped, "your parasites are unlike any ever encountered. They were moving around inside of you. Actively moving around, living in different parts of you." I didn't understand. Wouldn't I have felt them? Not with how small they were, but it's hard to explain. They were living inside of you, boy. They were like the stowaways in that book, The Borrowers, he said with a sick laugh. I shuddered. "What do you mean?" "It would be easier to show you, but it won't make understanding any easier." He reached into his white coat and pulled a small vial out of his breast pocket. He handed it to me and said, "This is what's been living inside of you." It wasn't a what. It was a who. Inside the small glass vial, on the very bottom of the container, was an almost imperceptibly small humanoid, naked and devoid of any kind of hair. I couldn't believe it. As I turned the vial, the tiny fleshy blob rolled around like a corpse with hands and feet, if you could anatomically refer to them as being the same, splayed out like a rag doll. A tiny, naked, human-like figure had been living inside of me. I could hear my heartbeat kicking up on the monitor next to my bed. Dr. Lambdis patted me on the shoulder and took the vial back into his jacket. We're sending samples of them to labs around the world, hoping we might be able to get some answers. Your brittle bones were a result of them hollowing out your bones from the inside. They fed on your bone marrow and would eat away at parts of your organs. On a microscopic level, you wouldn't show any damage until years had gone by, because they were so small. That's what happened to your appendix. It wasn't just infected. Part of it was gone, eaten away. I felt sick, unable to comprehend how such a thing could have happened. The thought of little burrowers digging through my flesh and feasting on my meat made my skin crawl. And there were still others inside of me at that very second. The chemo should eradicate them. We'll do a full-body x-ray in the morning, and hopefully we'll be able to see a full picture of just how many there were. I've explained it to your parents, but we'll be keeping you under close observation until we know you're in the clear. What will happen to the bodies inside me? I asked. Well, once they're dead, your white blood cells should be able to finish taking care of their remains, and whatever's left should be absorbed or pass on through, he said with a grim smile. Dr. Lambdis, I asked. Yeah, son? Where did they come from? We don't know. Nobody knows. I fell back into my pillow as Dr. Lambdis left, understanding why my mother's face had been so white. Damn. They had been eating away at me for years. Even though I've been given a clean bill of health now, there's one thing I'll never be able to answer. Something that will haunt me forever anytime I feel a random pain in my body or come down sick from another infection. How the hell did they get inside of me? And maybe worst of all, who else could the burrowers be living inside? It's a monster, Daddy. We should throw it in the trash. I stared at my daughter, speechless. Did she really just say that? Honey, this is your baby brother, I said. He's not a monster, and you shouldn't say things like that. My daughter just stared at me blankly. Okay, Daddy, she said. Without a word further, she turned and bolted out of the room. I could feel myself frown. I had read about this in the parenting books. The older sibling feels resentful of the attention that a new baby gets and acts out. I was sure that was all that was happening. Is Ellen okay? Asked the voice of my wife from behind me. I turned around. Why do you ask? I said. My wife, Mary, was already up and around the house just a few days after giving birth. She was so strong. She walked into the room and stared down at the baby inside. She just said the strangest thing, said my wife. I waited for her to go on, but she didn't. Well, it can't be worse than what she just said to me, I replied. She said that Jonathan was a monster and that we should throw him in the trash. My wife shook her head sadly. She said the same thing to me, she replied. And she said the monsters fooled Daddy, but he can't fool me. Can you believe that? An uneasy feeling of cold crept up the back of my neck. We should sit her down and have a talk, I said. My wife opened her mouth to reply, but yawned instead. Tomorrow, she said. It's late. Yeah, let's go to bed. What's that racket? I awoke confused. I turned on my phone screen to check the time. 2:23 a.m. The cloud of sleep slowly dissipated, and I realized that the sound was Jonathan crying in his crib. As I pushed myself out of bed and into my house shoes, a second realization hit me. The crying isn't coming from his room, and it sounds wrong. I looked down at my wife. Let her sleep. She's earned it. I followed the sound downstairs into the kitchen. The crying was muffled, and it was hard to place the source. I stopped dead and strained my ears. It seemed like it was coming from the sink. I approached the sink and stared at the drain, frowning. It's a monster, Daddy. We should throw it in the trash. No, she wouldn't do that. Would she? I opened the cupboard door and, to my horror, discovered my son Jonathan in the trash, lying on a bed of coffee grounds and banana peels. Oh my God. I pulled him out of the trash and gently brushed off as much of the damp coffee grounds as I could, while rocking him back and forth and gently reciting Hush Little Baby, his favorite song. Soon, he had drifted off. You should have left him there, came a voice from behind me. I turned to see my daughter Ellen. Why would you do this? I yelled, careful not to waken my wife. Ellen only shrugged. Monsters belong in the trash, she said. Her jaw was clenched, her nostrils flared. I won't let it hurt you and Mommy. Honey, what's going on? I instantly recognized the groggy voice of my wife and turned to face her. She looked at me, then the baby. Her eyes grew wide. I thought it was because of how dirty Jonathan was, but I was wrong. It was because she saw the knife. She rushed forward, brushing past me, in an attempt to put herself between our daughter and the baby. But Ellen was too small and too quick, and she easily dodged my wife's bear hug. I instinctually jerked away, and the kitchen knife only grazed my arm. Mary tackled Ellen to the ground and wrestled the knife out of her hand, throwing it aside so that it skittered across the tile floor. Her face was red, and strands of hair stuck to her sweaty forehead. What the hell is wrong with you? She demanded. Ellen said nothing. Jonathan began to cry, and I looked down at him to inspect for damage. Blood was leaking from a cut on his forehead. Without thinking, I reached down to wipe it off, but he immediately jerked my hand back, as if I had touched a hot stovetop. I held my hand up to my face in horror and watched the smoke rise as my son's blood burned through my fingertips, down to the bone. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the house. My wife, my daughter, and I locked eyes and froze. Thank you for making it this far. I'd like to encourage you to subscribe if you like my content. If you'd like to follow me and want to be involved in what I'm doing / talk to me, follow me on Twitter or Instagram. If you'd like an offline experience, check out the podcast, The Midnight Podcast. And if you're at all inclined, I've got some merch out there to be purchased if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.